Imagine an enemy you cannot see, cannot name, and cannot confront directly. It is not a person, it is a presence, a tension in a room that drains your energy, a future threat that haunts your decisions in the present, a slow, creeping doubt that weakens your resolve from the inside. This is the most dangerous opponent you will ever face. For centuries, the samurai understood that the greatest battles are not fought with swords, but in the shadowy realms of perception, atmosphere, and the mind. They called this profound, mysterious dimension of conflict Yūgen, the deep, shadowy essence of reality where true threats take shape long before they become physical. To navigate it was the highest strategic art. Our story begins not in feudal Japan, but in a modern office. Consider a man named David. On paper, David was successful, a competent mid-level manager, reliable, skilled. Yet, he felt perpetually off balance. His team's morale was inexplicably low. Key projects stalled without clear reason. In meetings, he sensed unspoken alliances forming against his ideas, a quiet dismissal in the silence that followed his suggestions. There was no overt rebellion, no single antagonist. The enemy was invisible, a collective shift in trust, a silent judgment, a climate of resistance that he could feel but not fight. Every attempt to address it directly only made him appear paranoid, weak. He was losing a war he couldn't even define. The samurai knew this feeling intimately. They lived with the constant possibility of an ambush, not just from an enemy in the bushes, but from a betraying ally, a shifting political wind, or their own creeping fear. Miyamoto Musashi, the legendary sword saint, wrote in his Dokudo, "Perceive that which cannot be seen with the eye." This was not mystical advice, but a tactical imperative. It meant training the mind to sense the intention behind a stillness, the hostility in a polite smile, the weakness in an opponent's posture before he even draws his blade. The battlefield was everywhere, and the first domain of combat was always perception. David's conference room was his Kawanakajima, his field of hidden stakes. Chapter 1. The Shadow Realm, Understanding Yūgen. Yūgen points to the profound mystery that lies beneath the surface of all things. In art, it is the unseen moon hinted at by a wisp of cloud. In strategy, it is the hidden maneuver, the unstated motive, the atmospheric pressure that precedes the storm. The samurai philosopher Yamamoto Tsunetomo in the Hagakure stated, "One should be careful and discerning about the atmosphere of a place. If there is the slightest discord, it should be resolved immediately." Discord here is not an argument. It is the subtle, invisible crack in the foundation. For David, the discord was the faint chill in the air during his presentations, the slight pause before his emails were answered, the way certain conversations would halt when he entered a room. These were the shadows of Yūgen. To fight the invisible enemy, you must first accept its reality. You must acknowledge that the most significant forces affecting your life are often those that leave no physical trace. This requires a radical shift in attention. We are trained to respond to the concrete, the shouted insult, the hard deadline, the physical obstacle. The invisible enemy, however, operates on a frequency most have learned to ignore. It is the quiet dread of future irrelevance, the erosion of respect over time, the silent judgment of a peer. The samurai cultivated a state of zanshin, remaining mind or complete awareness. This was not a frantic scanning, but a calm, pervasive alertness, like still water that perfectly reflects every passing cloud. David needed to stop trying to hear the enemy and learn to feel its presence. He began to practice a form of silent observation. He stopped talking so much in meetings. He listened not just to words, but to the cadence of speech, the direction of glances, the energy in the room. He was mapping the shadow realm. Chapter 2. The Unseen Blade, Cultivating Sensitive Perception. Musashi's principle of perceiving that which cannot be seen demands a disciplined refinement of the senses. The samurai practiced this through kensho, seeing into the nature of things. In duels, they would study an opponent for days, not just his technique, but his habits, his temperament, the way he wore his clothes, the set of his shoulders. Every detail was a brushstroke painting the man's invisible state of mind. The modern world bombards us with noise, making this sensitivity seem impossible, but the practice is the same: intentional subtraction. David began to create periods of deliberate silence. He would arrive at work early, not to check emails, but to sit in the empty office space, absorbing its atmosphere. He observed his colleagues not as co-workers, but as strategic entities. What were their unspoken desires, their quiet resentments, their hidden alliances? He started to see patterns he had missed entirely. The project delays often followed casual, off-the-record lunches between two senior team members. The drop in morale correlated not with his direct actions, but with a vague, pessimistic rumor about department restructuring that he had dismissed as gossip. The invisible enemy had a shape. It was a narrative, a story of uncertainty and doubt that was being written in the shadows, and he was cast as the oblivious character. The samurai knew that to lose control of the narrative is to lose the campaign. Sun Tzu, deeply studied in Japan, wrote, "All warfare is based on deception." The deception here was not a lie, but an alternative truth growing in the fertile dark of Yūgen. David had been trying to fight phantoms. Now he began to trace their source. Chapter 3. Striking the Void, Action Before Manifestation. The core strategic genius of the samurai was the concept of sensen no sen, to initiate the initiative. This is the art of winning a conflict before it physically begins. By acting in the moment, the opponent's intention first forms in his mind. You do not parry the sword thrust. You move into the space the thrust will occupy as your opponent's shoulder twitches. Against an invisible enemy, this means acting on the atmospheric cue, not the physical confrontation. When you sense the first trace of discord, the first shadow of a harmful narrative, you must act, not with force, but with presence. For David, the moment came when he identified the source of the pessimistic rumor. It was not malice, but fear from a well-respected team member about the company's direction. A traditional visible enemy would be met with a rebuttal or a command, but fighting an invisible enemy requires a counter-atmosphere. Instead of calling a formal meeting to address rumors, David invited the individual for a quiet walk. He did not confront or accuse. He spoke with calm authority about the larger vision, acknowledging the uncertainty while embodying unwavering focus. He presented himself not as a manager defending his position, but as a steady leader navigating the same shadows. He replaced the narrative of fear with one of purposeful resilience. This was his strike into the void, an action taken not against a person, but against the climate of anxiety itself. He was reshaping the Yūgen. Chapter 4. The Inner Fortress, Cultivating Unassailable Presence. No strategy can succeed if your own mind is a battlefield. The invisible enemy's favorite point of entry is your own doubt, your anxiety, your need for external validation. The samurai ideal of fudōshin, the immovable heart, was the ultimate defense. It is a state of inner stability so profound that external turbulence cannot shake it. It is not stoic repression, but a deep, unwavering connection to one's own purpose. Zen meditation, breath control, and the relentless practice of one's craft were the paths to this fortress. David realized his earlier desperation for approval, his visible frustration at the invisible resistance, had been like blood in the water. It signaled weakness to the entire ecosystem. He began a private discipline. Each morning, before engaging the world, he would sit in silence for 20 minutes, focusing only on his breath, allowing the frantic thoughts about office politics to arise and pass without attachment. He reaffirmed his core purpose, not to be universally liked, but to lead with integrity and execute his duty with mastery. This internal work changed his external bearing. His movements became more deliberate, his speech less hurried, his gaze more steady. He was no longer reacting to shadows. He was a source of still light. The invisible enemy feeds on internal chaos. By imposing perfect order on his own spirit, David was denying it sustenance. The subtle tensions in the room began to dissipate not because of a speech he gave, but because of the quiet, gravitational pull of his newfound composure. Chapter 5. Winning the Unfought War. The Principle of Strategic Presence. The culmination of this path is a state of being where victory is secured without dramatic conflict. This is the essence of heijōshin, the everyday mind, the normal spirit. It is the ability to treat both crisis and calm with the same unwavering clarity. The warrior who has mastered the invisible does not walk in paranoia. He walks in profound peace because he knows he has already addressed the conflict in its embryonic shadow state. For David, the transformation was gradual but absolute. The The stalled projects began to move forward. The team's cohesion returned, stronger, built on a foundation of genuine respect rather than fearful compliance. The unseen hostility was replaced by an unspoken credibility. He had won not by defeating others, but by first perceiving, then mastering the hidden dimensions of the field. He won by understanding that the true battlefield was the collective psyche, and the most powerful weapon was a mind trained in Yūgen. He learned to act not upon events, but upon the subtle precursors to events. The enemy, the atmospheric friction, the silent narrative, the anticipatory fear, did not so much surrender as simply cease to exist, having found no place to take root. This is the highest application of samurai strategy in a modern world. The conflicts that define our lives are rarely declared. They emerge from the quiet spaces, from what is unsaid, from what is felt but not seen. Your duty is to hone your perception until you can sense the shift in the wind, the change in the light. Then, with the immovable heart, you shape the atmosphere around you. You act before the form takes shape. You strike the void, and in doing so, you protect everything. What you have learned today is not a set of tactics, but a shift in perception. You have learned to sense the battlefield that exists in silence, in atmosphere, and in the unspoken narratives that shape reality. You have learned the ancient principle of Yūgen, to respect the profound mystery of hidden forces, and you have learned to cultivate Zanshin, that state of complete awareness, and fudōshin, the immovable heart, to navigate those forces without being swept away by them. This is the art of winning the unfought war, of securing victory long before any visible conflict can ever begin. I leave you with this question to reflect upon. In your own life, what is the invisible enemy you have been sensing, but perhaps have not yet dared to name? Where do you feel that subtle discord, that atmospheric pressure, that shadow of a future threat? Share your insight in the comments below. I read everyone. If this philosophy resonated with you, if you found a moment of clarity in this exploration of shadows, then let me know. Your comments are the life of this community. And if you wish to continue this journey into the depths of strategy, discipline, and inner strength, consider subscribing. Together, we will delve deeper into these timeless principles. Thank you truly for your time and your attention. Thank you for listening this far. Until the next lesson, walk with awareness and hold your ground.